fights. How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the Ned's MMA channel. I am your host, Omar. Today we're going to talk about UFC 281 in Madison Square Garden, New York City, headlined by Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira, with the co-main event of Carlos Barca versus Zhang Weili. Man, this is a fantastic card. Can't wait to get into it. And if you guys notice anything different, if you've been watching or have been listening, got a camera finally. You can see my ugly mug and see me actually react with you guys in person with when I talk about these fights. And couldn't be any better with this fantastic card that we have this Saturday on November 11th. I believe it is. Let me just double check. November 12th, excuse me. November 12th. So, it's the annual NYC MSG card that the UFC always goes out with a bang with. And, they're not taking it lightly either here. A little bit of a New Zealand takeover. Israel Adesanya and his camp and some of his training partners are on here. And one of his boys right off the bat, Carlos Olberg versus Nikolai Negumereanu. Good fight at 205 pounds. Olberg is very fast. He's athletic. He's rangy, diverse, sneaky stance switches, quick hands with the jabs and straights. Only a few things about him is that he does have a bit of a questionable gas tank, and the level of opposition that he's fought in the UFC has been pretty weak, or matchups kind of came into his favor. He's 2-1 in the UFC. His first fight in the UFC, he fought Kennedy Nzechukwu, which he lost by TKO, even though he was piecing him up almost the entire fight. He really didn't have a lot of fight IQ in there. He was kind of just throwing everything but the kitchen sink at Kennedy, and he just couldn't get him out there, and he kind of gassed a bit, and then he got countered really bad with the right hook that kind of put him to sleep a bit and TKO'd him. Since then, he's rebounded with two wins, one over Fabio Cherant, who is not UFC caliber by any means necessary. That gentleman went 0-3 with the company. And Tafana Nchukwu, which on paper it kind of looks like a good win, but you look at how quick Tafan came back from getting absolutely flatlined his fight prior, and it only took a 3-month break. When you get knocked out like that, you need to take some time off. And on paper it looks good, but when you really look at it and take in those factors, it's not the most impressive thing getting a first round TKO finish over him when he was already probably very concussed going into that fight, which honestly I'm surprised his camp advised him against to take. But hey, Carlos did his thing, not taking anything against him. But when you're just looking at these resumes and you're trying to predict these fights, you got to take those things into consideration. Nikolai Negumereanu, young chap, the Romanian, is very good. Not the most, I would say, precise guy. Most technique. It doesn't look as pretty. It's not going to look as flashy as Carlos Olberg. But what he does have is amazing forward pressure, very underrated fight IQ, a very solid chin. He's tough. He's got heart. The only thing that I could probably say against him, in the very negative about his forward pressure, that he has very bad lateral movement. He kind of does move too much in straight lines, which makes him susceptible to straight punches, which Carlos is very good at. But I do think with Nikolai's underrated fight IQ, he's probably going to try to make it a grappling fest a little bit in that first round, really sap the energy out of Carlos, and then kind of put on the pressure in the second and third round like he did his last fight. Himself, I believe, is in a 3-fight win streak. One of them was over Kennedy, who Carlos beat, but also some factors you got to take into that Kennedy got a point taken away and it was a split decision for Nikolai. If that point wasn't taken away, Kennedy would have gotten that decision. And it was a very close fight, and that's why what I mean by he's susceptible to straight punches. Kennedy was kind of just tattooing his face all night with those straight punches. But like I said, that solid chin, that toughness, and that heart, he kind of really put it on in that third round, which I think in a few of those judges' scorecards kind of took him, were able to give him that decision on top of the point deduction. But as well as his last fight against Ihor, funny name, right? But Ihor's 18-2 coming into that, or 19-2, I believe. A little bit of a padded record, but the guy was a finisher, and the guy was tough, and he beat a very good guy on the Contender Series getting into the UFC. And like I said, showed good fight IQ. He made it a grapple fest in that first round, really sapped out the energy, and then just teed off on him once he saw that he had him hurt. Mixed it up, threw very good fakes, takedown fakes. That I wish fighters did more. Chad Mendes was fantastic at that, and he had a very sneaky uppercut going into a fake double leg shot back on top. And Nikolai was kind of doing a subversion of that. Not as pretty, not as fast, but it worked and it got him the victory in his last time out. For this one, I got to go with Nikolai by uh, either a decision or a late round, third round TKO. I just think the quality of opposition is a little too far apart for both guys. I think Nikolai's fought the better guys. I think he's improving each and every time, and he does physically look better each and every time he gets in there. In the Kennedy fight, he was carrying a little bit of more of a little more body fat around the midsection, but his last fight, you're starting to see some abs. You're starting to look more slender. You're starting to see more definement in his muscles. So that does mean he's working his ass off in the gym. Really working on that strength and conditioning, and that only helps him with his cardio. So I'm gonna have to go with Nikolai via decision. I just think he's overall a better fighter, and I think he's gonna mix it up to get that decision victory or a late third round TKO win. All right, moving on. Julio Arce versus Montel Jackson. Good fight. This is a little bit of an underrated, sneaky fight. I think both these guys are very underrated in the bantamweight division. Julio Arce, he's a veteran. He has octagon experience. He's been with the UFC since 2018. First fight in the UFC was against Dan Ige, a top 10 featherweight at one point, and he beat him. He made it a scrappy fight, a lot of scrambles in there, and he got the decision victory. He also has a win over Julian Erosa, who's I think just on the cusp of top 15 featherweight rankings. That guy's looked amazing. That one is aged very well. And that was at 145. At 135, it seems like he's found his home. He's very well rounded. He has good hands. He has a sneaky high kick, solid footwork, good lateral movement. Nothing really to take away from Arce other than possibly he just not well rounded enough to beat the top level guys. I don't think I see that with Jackson overall as being a far better guy. That guy that reaches that top 15 level of the bantamweight division. Montel Jackson does have reach. He does have deceptive power. He's well rounded. The only issue I have with him is kind of the same thing as I mentioned earlier with Olberg. The quality of opposition is not that great. He's very inactive. I think his last fight was over a year ago over JP Buys, who's JP Buys. I feel very bad for that guy. He's had a very tough road in the UFC. I just don't think he's UFC material either. So for this one, I think Arce is just got all the momentum going for him, and especially being an underdog, which I'm kind of surprised about at plus 175 on some bookings. I just got to go with the Julio Arce decision. I think Jackson has shown holes in his game. He's not undefeated in the UFC. I believe he's 3-2, and Arce, has things that will make Jackson, struggle a little bit. Montel Jackson is a pretty big bantamweight. He's not going to have that size advantage against Julio Arce, who's a former 145er and has beat big 145ers. So I got to go with Julio Arce by decision. And Arce, even in his losses, he's 18-5, but two of those losses in the UFC were split decisions. Easily could have gone his way. So can't hold that against him. Got to go with a Julio Arce decision. I don't think there's going to be a finish. But if there might be a finish, I could see Montel Jackson getting a TKO win, but I just don't, everything just favors Arce a little bit too much going into this. So I got to go with Arce. Got to go with my what my brain tells me. But yeah, Arce decision. Moving on to Mike Trizano versus Sung Woo Choi. Man, sleepy fight. Also, another sleepy banger of a fight. Mike Trizano plus 135, Sung Woo Choi minus 170. This is going to be a good fight. This is going to be a nice strikers fight. Sung Woo Choi, a striker. Mike Trizano, also a striker. Both guys, big as hell for 145, man. These are not small men fighting at the 145-pound division. These are taller, lengthier guys. Trizano, solid combinations. He's a better boxer overall. But he is a little bit shinny, maybe. I'm not going to entirely call it out. Maybe that just means his last fight against Almeida, maybe Almeida just hits that hard. Uh, Sung Woo Choi, very good KO power. He has very good hook. Um, he's not the most defensively sound guy, but he does have a good heart. And then, but he can be cracked often. His last fight, it kind of showed someone that can kind of take his shots and give it back against Josh Kulabau. Man, Sung Woo Choi was getting kind of beaten up in that first and second round pretty good. He had a good third round, so you can't take away the cardio in that. He has decent cardio if he's willing to still push on heavy in the third round after getting dropped numerous times in the first and second round. I think total times dropped in that fight was 4 times. Um, that fight actually could have been fight of the night if we didn't get Jiri Prochazka versus Glover Teixeira in the main event. That's fight of the year, no questions asked. But I just think Sung Woo Choi has a little bit too much power. He's Trezano also gets hit a good amount. And like I said, I think what Trezano's success has been at 145, especially, is his size advantage. This guy's pretty massive for featherweight. I think he's at 6 feet tall. Sung Woo Choi, I think, is just a little bit under that at 5'11" or at 6 feet as well. So his strengths aren't going to factor in here. So I got to go with a Sung Woo Choi decision victory. I don't think it's going to be TKO. I think Trezano is going to make improvements from his last fight since he did have a good fight. I mean, both these guys were coming off tremendous fights. Trezano had a fight of the night contender, and like I said earlier, Woo Choi's fight with Kulibao would have been a fight of the night if we didn't get that banger of a main event. So I'm expecting fireworks out of this one. I wouldn't be surprised if Mike Trezano tries to grapple a little bit, but I don't think it's gonna be enough for Sung to defeat Sung Woo Choi. So I got to go with the Sung Woo Choi decision. All right, moving on to a women's strawweight fight: Karolina Kowalkiewicz versus Silvana Gomez Juarez. They're very close on the odds in this, and it makes sense. Kowalkiewicz is just coming off a win over Felice Herring. Not the most, not the best win, but it's great for Kowalkiewicz's confidence because she was on a very, very bad losing streak. Kowalkiewicz was one of my favorite fighters when the UFC women's 115 division was introduced. She was great. She even beat Rose at one point, and she fought Joanna, put up a valiant effort against a prime Joanna back in 2015, I believe. The first MSG card, so this is a good coming back party for her, where she fought for the title. But, it's kind of hard to say how well she's going to look against Silvana Gomez Juarez. Silvana Gomez Juarez has power, but that's really the only thing she has. She hasn't shown the best grappling defense, the best wrestling defense, and she's on the older side. She's 38 years old, man. That's quite old for women's 115-pound division. That's the kind of age that most heavyweights are at, not women's 115ers. And I think Karolina's experience and her coming off a win just kind of solidifies it for me that Karolina's a fairly easy lock on this. I get why the odds are so close, but I just think Karolina was just going to be too much for her. She still trains out of an amazing camp, out of American Top Team, so I got to go with Karolina via unanimous decision. I don't think she's going to get a submission finish. She did struggle a lot to get against Felice Herring. It's mostly seemed like Felice Herring was kind of just, she was done in there. She didn't want to be there anymore, and it showed because she retired right afterwards. So I'm going to go with the Karolina via decision. All right, I believe this is the last fight on the early prelims. Otman Azaitar versus Matt Frivola. Otman Azaitar plus 125, Frivola minus 150. If this fight were to take place when it was supposed to happen, which I believe was like almost 2 years ago, I think it was going to happen on the Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier 2 fight back in January of last year. I think they had Azaitar at like minus 350. He was a massive favorite going into this. Now it's flipped because Azaitar, even though he has massive KO power, he hasn't fought in 2 years. And the opposition, the two guys that he beat in the UFC, are pretty chinny. They both have gotten flatlined beforehand and afterwards. Frivola is well-rounded. He's a big lightweight. He's a better grappler. The reason why these odds are still fairly close, I think it's because Frivola is a little chinny, and he's a little too willing to engage in in the dog fights. Make it slinging and banging. Just kind of just biting down on the mouthpiece and throwing. He cannot do that with a Zaitar. Fivola's been clipped before. He's been knocked out twice in the UFC. Both absolutely flatlined. And even in his last fight against the Mexican fellow, I forgot his name. Um, he dropped him like 4 or 5 times, but that guy was landing on him too. I think he even wobbled him at one point. If a Zaitar does that to you, man, you're going to sleep. A Zaitar has respectable power for a lightweight, and he can't do that. So I'm gonna have to go with an Zaitar TKO win, first round. I think a Zaitar, even though he's been inactive for 2 years, he has had fights booked since then. So it's not like he's been entirely, you know, inactive, injured. The reason why he's been inactive is because, if you don't know if you guys remember, the big news at the time was someone was trying to smuggle in potatoes. What Ali Abdelaziz said about his fighter Ahmed Zaitar, which is why they suspended him. I think that's fucking bullshit. I think they were probably trying to smuggle in some of the good stuff that USADA likes to look for, um, either it be an IV or any of that other stuff. But it was super suspect when you have one of your guys in your camp climbing balconies to get into your room. This is true. Look it up. I'm not making this shit up. This is literally crazy news when it was happening. But I think Zaitar is still going to win. And, it's a pretty favorable matchup for him. All right, moving on. First fight on the... I think all these are televised on ESPN, but I think these are the ones that are considered prelims now. The regular prelims. Andre Petroski versus Wellington Turman. This is an okay fight. This one doesn't really blow my hair back. I mean, for my grappling fans out there, I can see them being big fans of this one. But I think this is gonna get a little bit ugly. A little bit boring at some points. Especially if it goes into the second and third round. Petroski is a very strong guy. He's a good wrestler. His cardio is a little bit subpar, but he does have heart. He does push the pace. He does keep fighting, even it's in the third round. Even though you see him physically fatigued, he's still putting it on his guys and trying to get the finish every time he's out there. He had a big win last time out. He had a very good anaconda choke over Nick Maximov, which is Nate Diaz's boy. So that's pretty big. That's a pretty big deal. So he does have submission threats. Wellington Turman also coming off a big win. Armbar finish over Misha Serkinov. Misha Serkinov at one point was seen as the dark horse of the light heavyweight division. Even Anthony Rumble Johnson was like, I got to look out for that guy. That guy's dangerous. His career obviously didn't pan out as we expected, but that's still a good win. That's still a submission win over someone as decorated as Misha Serkinov in the grappling. Turman's young. He does have a full camp with him. That means his training partner is on the main event. He has Glover Teixeira there, the former light heavyweight champion. So he's going to be surrounded with good people. He's going to be surrounded with good people. He's going to be focused. Everyone's going to be, on the mission to win. And I think that's also going to help him a little bit. I think it's going to be a close fight. I think it's going to be a grueling fight, and I think it's going to be split decision. But I think Petroski is going to do enough in the first and second round to get the win. But I for sure see a judge giving it to Turman. So I'm going to go with a split decision win for Andre Petroski, 29-28 twice, with one judge giving 29-28 to Wellington Turman. All right, moving on to Erin Blanchfield versus Molly McCann. I'm very high on Erin Blanchfield. I think she's a fantastic fighter, and the odds agree with me as well. Erin Blanchfield is minus 400 with Molly McCann's plus 330. Blanchfield is very young. She's 23 years old. She's very, very well rounded. She's undefeated in the UFC so far, 3-0. Only one loss to Tracy Cortez, and that was split decision. So easily she could be undefeated. She's very good technically. She has good hands. She for sure looks like that next wave of mixed martial artists that are overall well-rounded. I think Molly McCann is one step behind that. Even though Molly McCann is gritty and she's coming off 2 big wins, those wins, I'm going to be honest, were a little bit of gimme fights. Both fights took place in England. The UFC and the company, they really love Molly McCann. Nothing against it. I get it. They need to break into that English market. They find her charismatic. I personally don't. I find her a little annoying, but I can't fault her for not being a bad fighter. She's a pretty decent fighter. She's gritty. She's willing to make it a dogfight. She's willing to do everything and anything she can to win. She's aggressive. She trains her ass off. But I do think her not fighting in England, and the spotlight isn't on her. And you have Blanchfield, a very, very good prospect at 23 years old, already on a three-fight win streak in the UFC. I think Blanchfield is just better all around, and I think Blanchfield is going to win via submission finish. I think she's that good. I think she's going to be champion once Valentina Shevchenko decides to leave, because Valentina is getting a little bit on the older side, and Blanchfield is, like I said, is just 23. And for Blanchfield, it's not a far distance for her to travel. I think she trains out of New Jersey. Doesn't have to travel for her. Molly McCann has to travel all the way from England, and it's like not like this isn't the English takeover. It's just her and her camp. It's not like where we have other fighters on the card. Like when you have Israel, you have not just Israel out there with his camp. You have Israel fighting, Dan Hooker fighting, Brad Riddell fighting, Carlos Orbo fighting. That's a whole camp together. That's the whole team together as one. Yeah, I feel like that helps. Same thing with what I mentioned earlier with um, Wellington Turman. Alex Bejeda is his training partner. I think Dominic Reyes also is training out of that camp too, or spend a little bit of time there. So I feel like that's a big factor as well. So I'm gonna have to go with Aaron Blanchfield via submission. Rambled on a little bit more than I needed to in that one. Sorry about that. Um, Moving on, Dominic Reyes versus Ryan Spann. Man, I can't wait for Dominic Reyes to return. I'm a big Dominic Reyes fan, man. I get it why he gets a lot of crap for a bit of his corniness, this athletic thing, but he's not wrong. And he's fighting Ryan Spann, and I agree with the odds -220 for Dominic Reyes. Ryan Spann +180. Reyes, he's taken his time off. He hasn't fought in 18 months, and I think that was a great choice on his end. He is on a 3-fight losing streak, but you look at those names. John Jones, he was robbed in that fight. People like to talk about uh, Sean O'Malley getting a gifted decision win over Peter Yan. That's not a robbery. I've rewatched the fight numerous times. Dominic Reyes was blatantly robbed against John Jones. There is no way on planet Earth you can give John Jones 3 rounds in that fight. Dominic Reyes won that fight fair and square, and then that man went on to go to defend his belt against Jan Blachowicz, lost by TKO, and then comes back, I believe, time frame wise, I think like 10 months, comes back and fights Jerry Prohaska, and then has a fantastic fight, one of the fight of the year contenders, for sure fight of the night. Um, hurts Jerry a few times. They hurt each other back, but Jerry being the samurai that he is, landed a vicious spinning elbow and knocked out Dominic Reyes. But you look at it, Jerry Prohaska is the current champion. He beat Glover Teixeira, and Glover beat Yan. I'm not saying that MMA math works in that moment, but both guys are champions. John Jones is still John Jones, regardless if that's still a loss on his record. That's what the history books are going to see. But losing a split decision to John Jones is not that bad. Losing to Jan Blachowicz is not bad. Losing to Jerry Prohaska is not a bad thing. Those are champions. Those are all world champions. I think Ryan Spann's a world champion? No, I do not. I think Reyes is new camp. I still think his cardio is good. I still think his speed is there. I still think his power is there. He's got great footwork, and a time off is only going to help him. And I said new camp, who's surrounding himself with good training partners. He said he's sparring with Alex Bejeda. He's sparring with Glover Teixeira. Spann, he is explosive. He is a bit diverse, but he is chinny, and he has bad cardio. I mean, my man got rocked by Anthony Smith in the first round and got finished by submission there. He got rocked by Johnny Walker, and he rocked Johnny Walker, but he couldn't finish him. And then he got TKO'd. He's been KO'd before. He got KO'd by Carl Robertson in the Contender Series. He took Sam Alvey to a split decision. Some of these performances just aren't good. and he is beating okay guys, but this is still Dominic Reyes, man. And Dominic Reyes feels fresh. He says he feels rejuvenated, and I believe him, especially for what he's doing, moving to a new camp, changing things up. And I think this is a great matchup for Dominic Reyes. So I'm gonna have to go with Dominic Reyes via TKO. He's gonna look like a brand new fighter. I think it's gonna be in the first round as well. So I'm gonna go with Dominic Reyes via TKO first round finish. All right, moving on. Renato Moicano versus Brad Riddell. Great fight, fantastic fight. Um, Sorry if you guys hear the heater turn on. It's a little chilly up here in the Midwest. Um, Moicano, one of the more underrated guys on the UFC roster. I feel like Moicano doesn't get enough respect, really, by overall fans. I think Moicano is one of the more, like I said, underrated guys, underrated resumes. You know, he's fought. Let me see, he's fought Jeremy Stevens, Calvin Cater, Jose Aldo, Korean Zombie, Rafael dos Anjos, Alexander Hernandez, Rafael Fiziev, and I'm pretty sure there's someone else in there that I missed. He's fought top notch guys. Not Brian Ortega too. Um, Nothing but top notch guys. His whole career, and Moicano's got great BJJ, fantastic leg kicks. Um, she shut down Calvin Cater with leg kicks. People seem to forget that Calvin Cater lost to Moicano. You know, he's got good straight punches. He's got underrated fight IQ. He knows where to take the fight. He knows how to. He reads fighters really well. Um, he is coming off a loss against Rafael dos Anjos, but my man came in on like 6 days notice, literally 6 days notice, and then dos Anjos had a full camp. He was training his ass off to fight Rafael Fiziev, um, for 5 rounds. Moicano had just fought a month prior. He didn't have an overall tough fight, but he did get tagged a little bit. He did show a little bit of wear in his victory over Alexander Hernandez, who he finished. He rocked him with straight punches and then semi dropped him. It was more like getting dropped and falling down for Hernandez when he was fucking collapsing off the cage. And then, Moicano snatches up that RNC, makes him tap. And then literally 4 weeks later, he's fighting Rafael dos Anjos at 160 pounds in a 5-rounder. And he showed a good showing in himself. I think that's like one of the better RDAs we're going to see. I'm not going to hold it against Moicano. That's why I look to the Alexander Hernandez fight more, because I think Hernandez is more um, uh, similar to Brad Riddell than Rafael dos Anjos. With their builds, they're very strong, compact guys. Um, um, Both have really good power. I think Hernandez is not as good as a wrestler, and not as tough as Riddell, but they're still similar. I think Brad Riddell's just kind of better in every single aspect. Um, Riddell is coming off 2 losses, both bad finishes. He got wheel kicked by Fiziev. Um, damn Fiziev, taking all these names. And his last fight out, he got rocked by Jalen Turner and then finished with a guillotine choke. Um, Riddell's always fun to watch, man. He's scrappy. He's always got great cardio, and he always gets stronger as the fight goes on. Um, I think I'm gonna have to go with Brad Riddell here, just because I don't think Moicano has that kind of explosiveness that a Fiziev and Jalen Turner have. And as the fight goes on longer, um, Riddell has shown to just exponentially get better as the fight goes on. I think Riddell's going to weather the storm in the first round. Moicano is probably going to try to bring it on him a little bit, but Moicano doesn't have the speed of a Fiziev. He doesn't have the explosiveness and reach as a Jalen Turner. But I do think he is going to win the first round. Brad Riddell usually always drops the first round in almost all his fights, but as the fight goes on, Moicano is going to gas a little bit, and Riddell's going to take over and win a decision via 29-28. Overall, in a fun, action-packed fight that I think is a little flying under the radar a little bit. I hope more people tune into this one. But now, on to the main card, Dan Hooker versus Claudio Puelles to open it up. Dan Hooker minus 155 versus Puelles at plus 135. A lot of people seem to be writing off Dan Hooker. I don't think they've really looked into this matchup really. Dan Hooker, even though he's lost to very, very top-notch opposition and his move down to featherweight was very, very stupid. I'm going to be very blunt about that. There was no reason for him to drop down to 145 pounds when he's already a big lightweight. And this string at 145 when he first joined the UFC nearly a decade ago did not go well for him. He lost to fighters that he was far better than. And I don't know what his camp or what he was thinking and thinking dropping down to 145 was a good idea, especially against someone like Arnold Allen. Um, but I think him being back at 155 against Claudio Puelles, who I am very highly on, I think this is a very good matchup for Dan Hooker. He's a far better striker. He has good takedown defense, and Puelles is not a good striker. He has an okay body kick, and his cardio is okay. He has very good BJJ, but he has horrible takedowns. His takedowns are very bad, and if you watch any of his fights, even DC saying he's a good grappler, but his entries to takedowns, he doesn't blast in. He doesn't pick up a single leg. What he does is he kind of just drops straight down and reaches over, and he's almost crawling to his opponent trying to get a takedown. You can't be doing that to someone like a Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker is going to time you and make you eat a knee down the middle. That's what people were saying Dan Hooker was going to do to Michael Chandler. I clearly didn't think so. I thought Chandler was going to win because Chandler's explosive, fast, and strong, and has pretty decent fight IQ when he decides to use it. Pules doing those kind of takedowns, and it's not like it's fast. It's just almost like dropping down, very telegraphed sometimes. I feel like that's just a recipe for disaster for Pules, and he hasn't shown that much major improvement in those set takedowns. If it does go to the ground for whatever reason, say he pulls guard, or he does show a good takedown defense, Hooker might be in trouble. And Pulis hasn't shown that. It seems like it's a bad habit at this point, and I feel like that's just perfect for Dan Hooker. Pulis is still young in the game. He's still going to learn, you know. So I'm going to have to go with the Dan Hooker to be a TKO finish. I think he's just going to put it on Pulis once Pulis can get his fight going. And I just think those kind of crappy attempts at takedowns are finally going to catch up with him. With someone like Dan Hooker, we're all going to be happy Dan Hooker gets a W because who doesn't love Dan Hooker? So we're all going to be happy for him getting this win. I just don't see how Pulis can get him to the ground with those kind of takedowns for someone that like Hooker is. Like I said, has very good takedown defense. Now moving on. Oh wait, did I say? I said Dan Hooker via TKO. Yeah, I think I already said that. Frankie Edgar versus Chris Gutierrez. Frankie Edgar underdog plus 185 versus Chris Gutierrez at minus 220. This is Frankie Edgar's retirement fight, man. What a legendary career. I just want to give props to Frankie Edgar. One of the few guys that fought at his natural weight class when everyone else was cutting ridiculous amount of weight. I mean, this Frankie Edgar was a UFC lightweight champion at one point. Back in 2010 to 2012. You know, he was always smaller than almost all the guys that he fought, and even then now he's smaller than some of these bantamweights. It's kind of crazy how the sport has developed. And he is going to look like a smaller fighter in there against Chris Gutierrez. I think Frankie's footwork, his quick boxing is still there, his fight IQ, and this being a retirement fight in his home state or home area, he's out of New Jersey actually, is just going to give him more motivation. Gutierrez, although he has great leg kicks, which Frankie has been susceptible to, he doesn't have the best takedown defense, and he doesn't have that killer power. Yeah, he has a TKO win in his last fight, but it was a spinning back fist, and his opponent, Donna Bataguriel, I believe is how you pronounce it, should have seen that coming. Gutierrez failed that spinning back fist like 4 times until he actually landed it. It was good timing on it. I watched the finish again recently. But even then prior, he didn't look great. Even in his fight with Cody Durden, that was taken to a draw. A flyweight, kind of dominated on the ground a little bit. Frankie is the underdog, and that's how Frankie's always been looked at in his career. And I think Frankie's going to win a decision. He's going to have a tough time in there. Gutierrez is going to chew up his legs a little bit, but I think Frankie, this being his last fight, having a little bit more fire under him, he's going to get the decision win, and we're all going to be very happy, maybe a little sad that Frankie's hanging it up because he's had a legendary career, absolutely legendary. But it would be fantastic for him to leave on a win, and I think he's going to get it. This is a good matchup for him. If it was anyone, honestly, if it was anyone else, I would have been a little nervous. Say if they gave him like a Ricky Simon or a Kyler Phillips, I've been like, dang man, the UFC is really letting him hang out to dry. But no, they gave him a very good fighter, but it's a favorable matchup, and I think he's going to get it done. All right, on to the feature fight: Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler. Dustin minus 220, Chandler at plus 185. Man, this is going to be fight of the night. It has it written all over it. Dustin Poirier, Michael Chandler. You hear those names, you automatically think of violence in action. Poirier, he's a better boxer, better cardio, and I think this is his first 3 round fight in years. I think it's been a very, very long time since Poirier's had a 3 round fight, and I think that's only going to uh, help him feel better, not needing to, go into the training camp dreading those 5 round camps. And he has a good chin at lightweight. Chandler has vicious power. He always makes it a dogfight. He does have explosive wrestling for a round and a half, give or take. Um, I do think Chandler is going to rock Poirier in the first round. Might wobble him a little bit, but I don't think he's going to be able to get the finish. Um, and I think and Poirier is no is Brad Riddell is similar in the way Poirier is, that they kind of get better as the fight goes on, and Poirier is going to just find his range. Chandler's going to slow down, and then he's just going to be piecing him up. Piecing him up, keeping him at range. Chandler is going to land some good leg kicks here and there. Like I said, rock him, wobble him, still be a dog in there. I think Poirier's power and precision, and cardio is just going to be too much for Chandler, and I think he's going to get a TKO win in the 3rd round, maybe even late 2nd round. But I got Poirier. Chandler just gets hit a little too much for my liking, but he's going to make it fun, and we might get another Fight of the Year contender on our hands. That's what I do like about Chandler, and that's why the UFC loves him, because he performs and he steps up. So I will not stand no Michael Chandler slander on my channel. All right, Carlos Barca versus Zhang Weili. I think this is one of the easier ones to predict, which is kind of crazy, considering this is a championship fight. Carlos Barca is at plus 300. Zhang Weili's at minus 4. Surprised that's not a little more wide. Esparza has got good grappling, solid BJJ, and that's about it. She, quote unquote, beat Rose Namajunas. No one won in that fight. Not Esparza, not Rose, not their corners, not the fans, not the UFC, not the world. Because that is one of the worst fights I've ever seen in my life. It was horrible. It was bad, and no one should be proud of that. And she basically just won the belt because she did slightly more than Rose. Slightly more. That's it. And that's what happens when you leave it in the hands of the judges. And, it wasn't impressive by any means necessary. And Zhang Weili looked beyond impressive in a rematch with Joanna Jędrzejczyk. She looked ridiculously strong. Her striking looked fantastic. She won by a KO, spinning back fist. And her grappling is ever improving. Once you saw them get into grappling exchanges with Joanna, dude, she was muscling around like it was nobody's business. Joanna's never gotten out grappled like that before. Not by Rose, not by Esparza, who she's fought before, not by anyone. I think Zhang is going to absolutely destroy. Zhang Weili is going to absolutely destroy Carlos Esparza. I think it's going to be a bludgeoning. I think it's going to be either 1st round or 2nd round, early 2nd round. I feel bad for Esparza, but this is the part of the fight game. And just Zhang's that Terminator. And Zhang, in my opinion, she beat Rose in that rematch. Sucks that they didn't give it to her. And I think she's not going to leave it in the hands of the judges. So I think it's going to be pretty hard to watch, to be honest, if you're a Carlos Esparza fan. Sorry to say it, but that's how I see the fight going. And Zhang Weili's so strong. If there's a clip going out there that she picked up Francis Ngannou, and with a high crotch, the 115 former flyweight champion picked up Francis Ngannou, the current heavyweight champion, who said he was walking around 290. Yeah, she's a beast. All right, but yeah, showing by TKO. Um, Now the main event: Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira. Man, this is the first time in a while that I've been excited for an Israel Adesanya fight. No disrespect to the champ, um, he just hasn't had the most exciting fights. Um, a little boring. Um, not enough action. His opponents are do hold some responsibility there as well. It's not just entirely Izzy, but there has been lackluster. They kind of been a little bit of yawning here and there, but not for this one. Alex Pereira, um, even though people are saying he got pushed up to a title, he was rushed there. I mean, yes and no. I mean, what, you guys want to see Israel fight Whitaker for the third time? You want to see him fight Vittori for the third time? Costa could barely get past Luke Rockhold. What? And that guy fights once a year. Strickland just got flatlined by Pereira. What, you guys want to see him fight Derek Brunson again? So this matchup makes sense. And it's a fantastic matchup. Why? Because Pereira has beat Israel Adesanya twice in kickboxing, and one of them, he flatlined him. Israel keeps bringing up that, watch the first fight, watch the first fight. I was whooping on him. And it's like, yes and no. Alex came in on extremely short notice. I think like a week, 10 days or something like that. And he still knocked you out. And he still was able to survive your onslaught. And Alex has gotten nothing but better since then. So has Israel. But also a lot of the fandom thinks that, especially the Izzy fans, think that he's more experienced, that he's been in MMA longer, he's going to grapple. Alex Pereira trains with Glover Teixeira, arguably one of the best grapplers at 205 pounds. Won his belt by submission, is beating other fighters by submission. Glover Teixeira is a fantastic grappler, and imagine having that guy just weigh on you every day for the past 2 years. You're telling me that Israel Adesanya is going to do something different to Pereira if it goes to the grappling? I don't think they're going to grapple. I think it's going to be a straight-up stand-up fight. I think Adesanya is going to be the master of range that he is. He's going to throw feints, leg kicks, stand switching. He does have the cardio advantage. I will give him that. But Pereira does have the power advantage, and he's also a range master himself. And he does have that mental edge of having 2 wins over Izzy. And he's not afraid to trade. Izzy has shown to be very, very hesitant to get in the pocket and trade. And I think we're going to see that against Pereira. I do think that Adesanya does win, though, via a very, very close fight, 48-47. We might even see on the social medias that some people thought Alex Pereira is going to win. But I just do think that Izzy does have the more experience in the cage. It is the bigger cage, which just helps Izzy even more. And I think he's going to be able to keep it at distance long enough for him to win a decision. Alex Pereira is going to bring it, and I do think he is going to stun Izzy at some points. Not drop him, not wobble him bad, but I do think he's going to stun him a few times, and he is going to get the win. He is going to make it a dogfight. He is going to make Israel dig deep. And Israel, I think, did say earlier today on Ariel Helwani's show that he wants to make it a dogfight. He wants to make it a bloody fight. I deep down, honestly, I don't think he wants that because I don't think he wants to stand and bang with Alex. Alex is coming out on top 9 times out of 10. But I think Adesanya is going to come in with a point to prove, especially for someone that's beaten him twice. So I'm going to take Adesanya via decision 48-47. Thank you so much if you're still here. I appreciate you sticking with me for 44 minutes. It's a big card. I try my best to keep this as short as possible. But once I get rambling, I get going. Please like and share. If you disagree with any of my picks, please let me know in the comment sections. We can discuss and see where we can agree to disagree. Always going to be super cordial with you guys. If you guys show respect, I'm going to show respect back. So thank you for being here. Thank you so much for supporting me and at least taking the time out of your day to watch my show. So I appreciate it. I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Please enjoy the fights, and adios.